See if you can spot the problem with how a certain section of our politicians and a certain section of our media is discussing the guy who attacked people at the synagogue in Manchester last week.
What will be inexplicable to many is how a man who grew up in Manchester, a naturalised British citizen, held the views he did. Have we failed on integration?
Man who had lived in this country for 30 years but was clearly not integrated into our society, clearly did not share British values, committing an appalling terrorist attack by going to a synagogue and killing British Jews. That is at the extreme level where failures of integration lead.
Blaming this attack on a failure of integration implies that the very concept of violent, bigoted hatred comes from abroad. It's foreign to the UK, that we had to import it in, and with this guy, it just wasn't Britished out of him enough. So the literally thousands of white people who were running through the streets last summer, attacking ethnic minorities, or doing it in Ballymena, Northern Ireland this year, were they not British? Were they from abroad as well? Have they failed to integrate? Like, Nigel Farage was explicit with this bias when he talked about Asian men abusing girls.
In this case, Pakistan, where people come into a country, there's no assimilation at all, and they bring with them a culture that degrades women.
Imagine trying to argue that the very concept of misogyny comes from abroad, it's foreign to the UK, whilst being an MP of a party with 5 MPs, one of whom, so 20%, was convicted of repeatedly kicking his girlfriend. And when you're asked about the crimes committed by your MP against a woman, you say...
So what you're saying here is that the court documents are irrelevant, so...
I'm saying a spent conviction is irrelevant.
But misogyny comes from abroad. Like, James McMurdoch, was he just not integrated enough? Does he need to take a citizenship test? Like, I know I keep saying this, but the news never brings it up. The leader of the party that is set to be our next government, according to the polls, was just on stage hugging somebody because they pled guilty to inciting racial hatred by calling for asylum seekers to be burned alive. A call that was acted upon because hundreds of people tried to burn down a government-run hotel full of asylum seekers and blocked the doors, i.e. deliberately trying to burn them all alive. And yet these same people will tell you that the attack in Manchester against the synagogue was down to a failure of integration, as if the very concept of racial violent hatred comes from abroad. Now, the deliberate attempt to push the idea that all evil comes from abroad and anything that's evil that's here should be ignored or straight up embraced. If you're uncomfortable calling that racism or xenophobia, that's fine. But ultimately, if your aim is to try and limit the violence on our streets and keep women safe, then anybody that skews the lens through which we view that evil so that it only looks at one section doesn't actually care about stopping that evil. So, can you see it now?